Welcome back. If you were at the meeting yesterday, you saw California deep in the weeds, so to speak. A $26 billion budget shortfall there. It's a state that continues to spend and does not have a very stable tax revenue stream because property taxes are kept very low and most of the money is collected through economic activity, sales taxes, income taxes, and the like. California, a state that basically already has legalized marijuana. They simply don't regulate it and tax it. Meanwhile, there are other states in this country that have a very different culture than the one in California. Take a look at Miguel Almaguer's reporting from La La Land.
I was gonna go to work, but then I got high.
In California, you can use a doctor's recommendation
But I got high.
to buy marijuana to get high.
To get your medical marijuana card.
Years ago, Prop 215 legalized medical marijuana. Now some want to tax this green to help pull the state out of the red.
We're marijuana consumers.
A new commercial launched this week argues medical marijuana users should be taxed.
We want to pay our fair share.
The ad is running up and down the state, and the idea is backed by some lawmakers who know California is strapped for cash. If regulated like tobacco and alcohol, they argue the tax could bring in over $1 billion for the state.
It's unfortunate but true that the economic situation obviously makes people take a second look at this.
Some would argue medical marijuana is part of California's culture. This dispensary is in a great neighborhood. It's across the street from a busy grocery store, and the doors are always open.
This is Third Eye, Allen Wrench.
At the pharmacy in Los Angeles, you can pick pot from a jar, find marijuana in a bottle, and grab a brownie that's more than just a brownie.
Weed is from the earth. God put this here for me and you.
Pop culture has celebrated marijuana, and many here are quick to embrace it.
It does a world of good.
But the federal government calls these shops illegal. On occasion, they're raided, and they're always controversial.
I wouldn't want my kids coming walking by and seeing it sold commercially like this.
And that may be one of the many reasons California's governor may never sign legislation to impose a higher tax on marijuana.
I think that we must protect the current laws, and I don't think that we ought to change the law just because of financial reasons.
But as the state copes with the $26 billion deficit, tax proponents say this could be a real fix for a broken state. And that, they argue, is no fiscal smokescreen. For MSNBC, Miguel Almaguer, Los Angeles.
An interesting conversation, to say the least. Contessa here. We're joined also by Barry McCaffrey, General Barry McCaffrey, I should say, retired general, military analyst at NBC, and most importantly for this conversation, former National Drug Policy Director, very familiar with this conversation. The gentleman you look at here, Rob Van Dam, out of Burbank, champion professional wrestler and pro-legalization, also very familiar with the conversation. General, I'm going to begin with you because I presume most folks are familiar with a lot of sides of the argument. In other words, I think in an ideal world we would not have drug use in this country, period, is the truth of the matter. But we are now in a situation where, again, alcohol is legal for some, cigarettes are, you know the narrative. Why not, in other words, if you're going to have tax revenue from alcohol and tobacco because you've accepted its presence in society, whether you like it or not, which is what we've done as a group, why is it not appropriate to introduce marijuana into that conversation?
Well, I think it's a legitimate debate. It's an appropriate topic. It's come back into the fore again. Look, practically, personal possession of marijuana has been decriminalized in most parts of the country for over a decade. The problem is, for many of us, I'm very much involved in drug and alcohol rehabilitation treatment centers. We got 15 million Americans who are chronically addicted to illegal drugs or alcohol, the most dangerous drug in our society. We got, the better part of 400,000 Americans a year that die from cigarettes. So I personally believe the notion that we ought to legalize pot in general or the smokescreen of the medical pot argument is unhelpful. We'll end up with higher rates of drug abuse over time, and it's not a wise move.
And I guess the balancing act in that conversation is, because there's obviously plenty of evidence to back up what you just said, but the balancing act is, it's happening anyway, we're foregoing the revenue, A, and B, because it's a black market product in places like the level of violence in Mexico, et cetera, it continues to go up, and the incarceration rates and the expense associated with incarceration. I don't know if we have a graphic on New York and the Rockefeller laws, but it's all know that narrative. So how do you balance the money?
Let me sort of add a notion, though, that nobody thinks that taxing alcohol and cigarettes pays off the enormous social harm it does. Alcohol is the most corrosive impact on American society imaginable.
I agree.
Cigarettes, as we talked, 500,000 dead.
Right. I agree.
So nobody wins out of the taxes of these substances. We could tax prostitution. We could tax heroin. These are false arguments. The real problem is 15 million of us are chronic substance abusers. So, by the way, when it comes to pot, if you're 40 years old, you live in a log cabin in Oregon, you got 12 giant pot plants in your backyard, have a ball. What I want to talk about is let's keep drugs to the extent we can out of the hands of adolescents, 6 through 12th grade.
So let me get Rob in here. And again, I think the general makes a good point. There are a lot of folks that say, listen, if you're 40, if you're a professional wrestler and you've got a bag of marijuana at home, go nuts. But when I take your advocacy, Rob, and others like you of this drug and allow it then to penetrate into the school system, into the school bus drivers, all the more vulnerable parts of society are what we need to protect, not just for the indulgence of adults like yourself or others. How do you deal with that?
Dylan, you're right. That's exactly why we need to regulate it. Currently, marijuana is on the black market, and it's not going anywhere. Eradication is not an option. Why fund a war that we absolutely cannot win? Marijuana has been prohibited for over 70 years, and right now, it's the #1 cash crop in the state of California. And it's the #1 cash crop in the country, with almost half of adult Americans have admitted to trying it. It's not going anywhere, so we're wasting money by lying to the people, by giving them false education. We just heard Barry McCaffrey say that because people die from cigarettes, that's why we shouldn't legalize marijuana. That's ridiculous. That's exactly why we should look at legalizing it. 0 deaths. While almost 500,000 people in America every year die from cigarettes, and over 150,000 straight up from alcohol poisoning. Zero cases in the history of the planet for marijuana. We need to take these billions of dollars off the streets, put it in our economy. We don't want to tap into that? Of course we do. Regulate it, keep it away from the kids, keep it away from the drug dealers, and put it in our economy.
General?
Look, I spent a lot of time in drug and alcohol treatment centers, and I talk to young men and women in their 20s in recovery, and I always end with, hey, what should I tell high school kids about marijuana? Invariably, without question, all people in recovery say this is one of the gateway drugs, adolescent drug-taking behavior. I don't want to see it legalized. I think it's a mistake.
But what about his point that legalizing it actually allows you to better regulate its accessibility to the adolescent? In other words, the very concern that you have is better served. And
that's completely silly. We want marijuana in 7-Eleven stores, and we think that's going to make it less available to high school kids.
But what if you put it again? California already has a retail structure.
Los Angeles has hundreds of shops all over the city. It's now becoming a social problem.
Pay taxes.
Amsterdam tried the same thing. It sort of brings with it a collection of behavior that are unattractive to moms and dads and employers. It's not a good idea.
We're going to take a break. I want to get Contessa's point of view on this. We will continue this conversation. Rob, sit tight. General McCaffrey, sit tight. Contessa, I know you've got strong points of view on this yourself. We are back with more on the legalization of marijuana. Is it worth it for the prisons and the tax revenue, or is the social liability that already infests our society with cigarettes and all the rest of it only exacerbated by a decision like this? Is it, political expedience to get the money at the expense of society by introducing another drug? We'll have that conversation after this.